In 1970, a young actor spent 6 months riding in police cars through the most dangerous streets in San Francisco. That actor was Clint Eastwood, and what he witnessed during those nights would haunt him for decades. The Tonight Show studio was alive with its signature Tuesday evening energy in Manhattan. The familiar blue and gold lighting created that warm, electric atmosphere that had made the show a late-night institution for decades. Clint Eastwood sat across from Jimmy Fallon, both engaged in what appeared to be a typical celebrity interview about his legendary career and recent directing projects. The Roots had just finished their smooth musical transition, and the cameras were rolling hot. Jimmy's iconic curved desk gleamed under the professional studio lights, while the New York City skyline sparkled through the backdrop windows like a constellation of cinematic dreams and Hollywood legends. Clint looked every inch the living legend he had become. At 94, he still possessed that iconic presence and measured demeanor that had captivated audiences for over 7 decades, though now seasoned with the wisdom and gravitas that came from a lifetime of creating unforgettable characters. Dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit with his silver hair neatly styled, he radiated the same quiet intensity that had made him one of cinema's most enduring figures. "So, Clint," Jimmy said, his animated gestures punctuating every word, "at 94 years old, you're still making movies, still directing. You've given us some of the most iconic characters in film history. The Man with No Name, Dirty Harry, William Money. What keeps you going?" Clint's eyes held that characteristic blend of humor and seriousness. "Well, Jimmy, as long as I have stories to tell and the health to tell them, I figure I might as well keep working. There's something about creating characters that connect with people that never gets old." The audience was clearly in awe of his presence, several older fans in the front rows leaning forward with obvious reverence and admiration for this Hollywood legend. "And speaking of iconic characters," Jimmy continued, "we have to talk about Harry Callahan. Dirty Harry changed action movies forever. That character felt so real, so authentic. How did you prepare for a role like that?" Clint's expression became more thoughtful, more reflective. "Harry was different from anything I'd done before, Jimmy. He wasn't just a tough guy. He was someone who'd seen too much, who carried the weight of the job in a way that most people don't understand. I knew I had to get inside that world if I was going to make him believable." The conversation was flowing naturally, touching on his early career, his work with director Don Siegel, and how Dirty Harry had become a cultural phenomenon. The studio audience was completely engaged, hanging on every word from one of Hollywood's most respected figures. "That famous scene, 'Do you feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk?' has become part of American culture," Jimmy said with obvious admiration. "That delivery, that intensity, it feels like it came from somewhere real. Was there a specific moment that inspired that?" Clint nodded slowly, though there was something deeper in his eyes now, something that spoke of memories and experiences that went beyond typical acting preparation. "That line worked because Harry had been pushed to his limit, Jimmy. He was tired of seeing good people hurt by people who didn't care about consequences. That anger, that edge, you can't fake that. You have to understand it." It was in this moment of reflection about authenticity and character preparation that a voice from the audience cut through the studio atmosphere with the authority and directness of someone who had lived the reality Clint had portrayed. "Mr. Eastwood?" Both Clint and Jimmy turned toward the sound. In the 5th row, center section, an older man in his 70s was standing among the seated audience members. He had graying hair, a weathered face, and wore a simple blue blazer that suggested dignity without pretension. His posture was straight, confident, carrying the bearing of someone accustomed to authority and respect. "Yes, sir," Clint responded immediately, his voice carrying the respect he had always shown for working people and veterans. "What's your name?" "My name is Captain Frank Romano, retired," the man replied, his voice clear and strong, carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades in command. "San Francisco Police Department. I served 32 years on the force." "Captain Romano," Clint repeated with obvious reverence. 32 years in San Francisco. That's a long time protecting that city." Captain Romano took a measured breath, and suddenly the energy in the studio shifted dramatically. The lighthearted conversation about career achievements and iconic performances was about to become something much more personal, much more profound. "Mr. Eastwood," the captain began, his voice gaining conviction with each word. "I need to tell you something that's been on my mind for over 50 years. In 1970, when you were preparing for Dirty Harry, you rode with my unit for 6 months." The studio fell silent. This wasn't just a fan sharing a memory. This was someone who had been part of the real story behind one of cinema's most famous characters. "I was a sergeant then, working the Tenderloin District, some of the toughest streets in the city," Captain Romano continued, his voice carrying both respect and a kind of weighted recognition. "And you weren't just visiting for a few hours or days. You were there, night after night, seeing what we saw, dealing with what we dealt with." Clint sat completely motionless, clearly moved by this unexpected connection to a time in his life that had clearly been deeply formative. "But here's what I need to tell you, Mr. Eastwood," Captain Romano said, his voice becoming more emotional. "What you witnessed during those 6 months, what you experienced riding with us, it changed you. I could see it happening. And it changed how you played Harry Callahan." The weight of Captain Romano's words settled over the studio, like a revelation. Everyone present understood they were hearing from someone who had been present during the creation of one of cinema's most iconic characters. "So, I have to ask you," Captain Romano continued, his voice now carrying both curiosity and deep respect. "How did those 6 months on the street change your understanding of what it means to be a cop? Because what you brought to that role wasn't just acting, it was truth. The silence that followed was profound. This wasn't just about preparation techniques. This was about the intersection of art and reality, about how experiencing someone else's world can fundamentally change how you understand humanity." Clint stared at Captain Romano for a long moment, clearly struggling with memories and emotions that he had kept largely private throughout his career. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, quieter, more vulnerable, stripped of all Hollywood performance. "Captain Romano," Clint said softly, "I remember you. I remember that badge, that voice, the way you handled situations that would break most people. Thank you for letting me into that world." Without hesitation, without consulting producers or following any protocol, Clint Eastwood stood up from his chair and walked directly into the audience toward Captain Romano. "Sir," Clint said as he reached the captain's row, "may I shake your hand?" The captain extended his hand, and both men shared a moment of connection that transcended entertainment. The recognition between two people who had shared dangerous experiences and understood their weight. "To answer your question, Captain," Clint began, his voice now carrying the weight of decades of hidden truth. "Those 6 months changed everything I thought I knew about courage, about justice, about what it costs to stand between good people and chaos." The studio audience was completely silent, recognizing they were witnessing something deeply personal and authentic. "I saw you and your partners make split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death," Clint continued, his voice growing more emotional. "I saw you deal with domestic violence, drug dealers, people at their absolute worst, and somehow maintain your humanity through all of it." Captain Romano was nodding knowingly, clearly understanding the weight of what they had shared. "But here's what I've never talked about publicly," Clint said, his voice now thick with emotion. "There was a night, must have been month 4, when we responded to a domestic disturbance call. A man had been beating his wife, and when we arrived, he had a gun. Jimmy had left his desk and was now standing at the edge of the stage, clearly recognizing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. "You went through that door first, Captain," Clint said, looking directly at Romano. "No hesitation. And when that man pointed his weapon at you, I saw something I'd never understood before. I saw what real courage looks like. Not movie courage, not scripted heroism. Real courage." The emotion in Clint's voice was palpable, as decades of carefully guarded memories gave way to unexpected vulnerability. "The way you talked that man down, the way you protected his wife while still treating him like a human being, that's what I tried to bring to Harry Callahan. Not just the toughness, but the responsibility that comes with having power over other people's lives." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn police badge. "This is an honorary badge the department gave me after those 6 months, Clint said, showing it to Captain Romano and the cameras. "I've carried it for 53 years because it reminds me that the real heroes aren't the characters I play. They're people like you, who do this job every day." He placed the badge in Captain Romano's hands. "I want you to have this back, Captain. because you taught me that being tough isn't about intimidating people. It's about being strong enough to protect those who can't protect themselves." The studio was completely silent, except for the soft sounds of people being moved to tears by this unexpected moment of recognition and respect. "And Captain," Clint continued, his voice now filled with hard-earned wisdom, "every time someone quotes that 'do you feel lucky' line, I think about what you taught me. That line works because Harry wasn't trying to be scary. He was trying to make a punk think about consequences before someone else got hurt." The audience began to applaud, but Clint held up his hand gently. That anger in Harry's voice wasn't about power, Captain. It was about frustration. Frustration that good people like you have to risk your lives because some people choose to hurt others instead of building something positive. Captain Romano was wiping his eyes now, clearly moved by this recognition of his service and sacrifice. "And Captain," Clint concluded, "I want everyone here to know that every cop who saw Dirty Harry and felt like it understood their experience, that's because of officers like you who are willing to let a Hollywood actor see what your job really costs." Jimmy, his voice thick with emotion, addressed both men. "This is incredible. 53 years later, we're finally hearing the real story behind one of cinema's most iconic characters." But Clint wasn't finished. He began removing his charcoal gray jacket. "Captain Romano," he said, draping the jacket over the man's shoulders, "this jacket has been with me through countless interviews where I've kept this truth private. Tonight, it goes home with someone who lived the reality I was honored to witness." Captain Romano, now wearing Clint's expensive jacket, stood straighter, clearly moved by this recognition from someone whose portrayal had honored his profession. "And Captain," Clint continued, "I want you to know that every police officer who felt like Harry Callahan understood their burden. That was your gift to me, and through me, to them." He turned to address the cameras directly. "To every police officer watching, to every person who puts themselves in danger to protect others, your courage isn't glamorous. It's the daily choice to stand between chaos and order, and that's heroic." The show ended differently that night. No standard closing monologue, no promotional segments. Just Clint and Jimmy sitting with Captain Romano as the credits rolled. Three men connected by the understanding that sometimes the greatest performances come from honoring real heroes rather than creating fictional ones. When the episode aired 2 weeks later, it became one of the most watched Tonight Show segments in the show's history. The hashtag #DirtyHarryTruth trended globally. Captain Romano became an advocate for police community relations, speaking at events about understanding those who serve. Clint never spoke publicly about changing his approach to discussing preparation methods, but those close to him noticed something different. In subsequent interviews, he began acknowledging how his respect for real police officers had influenced Harry Callahan. And every time someone quoted, "Do you feel lucky?" after that night, Clint thought about Captain Romano and the officers who had taught him that real toughness isn't about intimidation. It's about courage to protect others when it costs everything.